Welcome to Soberly Speaking. I'm Julia Rangiheua. Richard Galvan grew up in LA, born into a world of substance abuse, violence, selling drugs, and gangs. Richard became an alcoholic at just 12 years old, which quickly spiraled into a heroin addiction, really before he understood the gravity of his situation. He had a sliding doors moment on Skid Row while doing crack cocaine. He chose to detox in jail and got someone pregnant in rehab. Despite generational trauma and the chaotic influences around him, Richard now celebrates 2 decades of sobriety. He's also the author of The Addict, which we discuss throughout this episode. Trigger warning, this episode discusses themes of substance abuse and violence. I hope you love this chat with Richard. Richard, when I came across your profile, your bio says ex-Skid Row junkie, ex-rehab owner, 20 years sober. I am so excited to talk to you, but let's go back to your childhood, Richard. What was your childhood like?
I mean, my first memories were seeing my mother snort cocaine, be physically abused. I grew up in a drug, I grew up on a street in the San Fernando Valley where everybody went to buy drugs. So, and it was like a gang neighborhood, basically. Somebody breaking in our house, somebody bleeding out, being stabbed in our driveway. And I have some memories of like preschool, believe it or not. And I have memories of my kindergarten crush, but that's those are the farthest back I could think of that I can pinpoint a time, an actual timeline.
At that age, was school a safe haven for you?
I wouldn't say, I think it was neutral. I wouldn't say it was, I didn't feel awkward there. I didn't feel safe there. Everywhere I went, I carried some type of like fear, anxiety, if that makes sense.
Did you have siblings, Richard?
No, when my parents remarried, then siblings came, but I was like 12 by that time. So I have 2 brothers, 2 sisters.
So as a child, you never had stability, you never had a safe home. How does that set you up for your teenage years? Do you get into drugs and drinking quite fast? Did you think that that was the only route for you?
I had grown up seeing everybody do drugs and the smell of marijuana, but I didn't know that that's what it was till I was about 5th grade. And the thought had never occurred to me to do drugs. I had been taught, I went to DARE class, and it's bad and all this. I had never even occurred to me. But one day in the summer of 6th grade going into 7th grade, out of nowhere, I just went in my father, I went in the fridge and I poured myself some vodka, drank it, filled it back up with water. And then I I felt so good. Like it was just it wasn't like I'm going to get fucked up or, it was just something like, oh, there's a porno here, or, oh, there's what's this? I was just going to get into it. And when I drank, I felt relief immediately of like anxiety. I didn't even, an anxiety and like a fear and everything that I didn't even know I had carried with me until it was relieved. Like I say in my book, like I had been suicidal before I even knew what suicidal was. I had always like wanted to die and was fearful and just hated life, but I didn't even know that could be relieved until I drank for that first time. And from that day, I was already a thief. I was already doing crime and stealing and stuff. And from that day on, I switched from stealing clothes and candy and beef jerky to stealing liquor every day, and I became an alcoholic straight away.
So you started drinking every day when you were year six going into year seven.
Every single day. Yeah.
How old is that, Richard? Just so we can get in like Australian terms, how old is that?
That's 12 ish.
Mhm. You've already touched on the fact that your earliest memory is of your mother doing substances. Did the alarms raise for anyone in your life thinking Richard's suddenly drunk all the time or Richard's more absent minded, or did you just fly under the radar?
Well, my grandma was a heroin addict, and my grandpa died drinking in the back room, and my dad was doing drugs. Not at that time, but was, familiar with drugs. And they kind of laughed it off. They caught me drunk that first time, and they just said, oh, he's going to feel like shit tomorrow. And, I think as long as I was out of their hair, they never really messed with me about the drugs and alcohol until I started doing harder drugs later. So
Talk me through the logistics of having a drinking problem at the age of 12/13 and going to school.
so I was a big instigator with all my friends. I was kind of like the pioneer, the first one, to make them do uh, meth, heroin, Ritalin when they prescribed me on that, weed, um, for my age, because I lived in some apartments where there was the older like gang members that were funneling to me, and then I funneled it to my friends. So when I started drinking every day, and I pressured my friends. The next day after I drank, I pressured my friends into drinking, which they were all for. And every morning before school, we would meet up like in this alley behind school, and we would just drink and smoke weed. We would drink, we would smoke weed, and then we would bring like water bottles full of vodka or full of whatever liquor and put in our locker and drink.
Did it escalate to harder substances quite quickly?
Yeah, so the teenagers in my neighborhood were already doing harder drugs, but they were just giving us weed, and would buy bottles of liquor for me and my friends. They didn't want to give us hard drugs until I got a prescription for Ritalin. When I got a prescription for Ritalin and I was snorting lines and selling it to them, um, they felt comfortable with giving me. Back then it was crank, like peanut butter crank, uh, and when I started doing that with them, and then doing crimes for them, and uh, gang related stuff, they got comfortable with me and would give me coke and crank, and then I kind of funneled that to my friends in my age group.
Were you making money from it, Richard, at this time?
Yeah, no, I mean nothing significant, but I would have $50, $100 in my pocket, plenty of drugs. I wasn't Scarface or anything.
Was it tempting to join one of these gangs, or did you consider yourself to be an affiliate?
I did join the gang, and yeah, that was like the best you can do in my friend group and in my area. That was kind of like joining the football team for somebody in a different part of town.
Let's move on to after high school. What were you like, Richard?
So I dropped out of high school in 11th grade, not by choice. Um, I had been to 5 different high schools. They put me in. I mean, so I left high school, and I started doing heroin in 10th grade, so like 16. And I was already a full blown heroin addict by 11th grade, which is like 17 ish. And when I left high school, my father threw me out. I got caught doing heroin. My father threw me out. I was living with my friends for a while. I was living in hotels downtown. It's our Skid Row from Los Angeles. Yeah, it was just a full blown heroin addict, junkie, crackhead, all that.
So you're living in Skid Row when you are just a teenager. When you're there, do you think, holy fuck, I'm in fucking Skid Row? Or do you think, no, this is the place where I can source drugs. Like it makes sense that I'm here.
I guess I kind of acclimated to it because we had all being from the valley. So in Los Angeles, the valley is kind of the uh, suburbs. Doesn't mean they were nice. There's nice parts and there's bad parts. But we would take the train from North Hollywood in the valley to Skid Row to buy our drugs cheaper and then bring it back to the valley and sell it to the kids. So I had been familiarized and kind of acclimated to being there a lot. And when I was kicked out, um, it seemed normal to stay in those hotels because we would party with girls and with our friends in those Skid Row hotels anyways. So when I had to stay there longer term, it didn't feel very weird. But I remember the day that it dawned on me. And I talk about this, it's kind of the opening in my book. I was smoking crack with this old black crusty like junkie that I smoked crack with. He must have been like 50, 60, but he was my friend. And we were like, we're smoking crack. And then this group of teenagers, they must have been going to prom or like some type of dance or something. We're all dressed up, all nice, taking pictures in front of a limo. And he told me, man, what the fuck is you doing here? And I was like, what do you mean? What the fuck are you doing here? Like what? And he goes, man, you're supposed to be with them folks over there. And he started, and I'm like, fuck you, you're here too. You know? And I kind of brushed it off, but it dawned on me later. I'm like, fuck, what am I doing here? Like I said, my grandma was a heroin addict. My grandpa was an alcoholic. A lot of my family was gang members. Nobody was like a real winner. My father ended up doing okay, and my stepdad later ended up doing okay as well, doing pretty good. But at that time, I just figured I'm where I'm supposed to be. But I did, there's a point when you're a kid that you're not really like it all happened so fast before I knew, like before I was like fully conscious of everything. Before I knew it, I was a heroin addict. Like I blinked to my eyes and I'm downtown and I'm homeless. And this is my life. So it was that is a weird feeling because I didn't like if when I'm an adult and I do something, I'm kind of fully aware. But when you're a kid and you just high from preteen all the way till adult, you just, oh shit, what did I do? Why the fuck am I here?
When was the first time you did heroin, Richard? Who were you with?
We were in gym class, and a friend of mine said, "Are you ready to try the mother of all drugs?" And I'm all, and he opened up a little piece of foil with tar heroin on it. Now we had done, uh, we were mostly just doing meth and drinking and smoking weed and psychedelics and all that. But one of our friends got out of prison, and he was a heroin addict, and he kind of got everybody. That's kind of how it started in my crowd. Uh, and during lunch, we went to McDonald's, to the McDonald's bathroom, and smoked heroin. And fuck, I don't know if I had ever felt better in my life. I went back to school loaded, and I just felt like this beautiful, just feeling again, like that first day I drank. And everybody warned me about it. Everybody told me, like, oh man, you're gonna fuck up your life. What are you doing? Why are you messing with those dudes? Uh, and they had told me either you're gonna get sick and hate it, or you're gonna love it. And I fucking loved it, you know, which makes me think my some of my other friends hated it, and I think, man, they were fucking lucky that they. But then maybe I was lucky because I got heroin brought me to my knees and crack brought me to my knees. I might still be drinking or doing meth if I didn't start doing heroin, And a lot of those guys got worse older, whereas I got better older. Not better, but I ran through my to my bottom faster.
You're surrounded by drugs. You are an addict at that age. Was there a lot of violence in your life at this time too?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So LA in the '90s was like a really heavy gang culture, at least in my world. And I was robbing people. I always carried a gun or a knife with me. I had been stabbed. I had been, I had my nose broken a few times, my teeth knocked out a couple times, my cheekbone fractured. If you look at my lips, my teeth had been pushed through. Concussions. A couple of my friends were killed. One friend was shot with a shotgun right standing next to me. Um, I was fighting constantly. So yeah, I like to call it uh, Rambo mode, because there was a time for a couple years, all the way up until I got clean, where I was just in this survival mode, even being locked up and being in and out of jails. Uh, People looking for me, I'm ripping everybody off and I'm fighting all the time. It puts you in this like heightened, like Rambo mode, I call it. And I was talking about it in a meeting last night. Uh, when I got sober, 1 month I'm picking bullets with eyebrow tweezers from my friend's ass. And the next thing you know, I'm in a fucking AA dance. It's like, I don't know what the fuck, like, felt like I just got back from Vietnam. You know what I mean? I didn't know how to like handle regular life. Everything was in slow motion. And I just felt like, where the fuck am I? Who are these people? You know what I mean? Nobody on earth. I've never met anybody on earth like me at that point. Uh, this person lost his boat. This person was in a divorce, or this kid drank too much in college. And I'm like, I was still like healing from being stabbed, and I was in all this chaos. And now it just went sober.
I do want to circle back to your sort of early 20s getting locked up in jail. Talk to me about the first time you got arrested.
First time I got arrested was in sixth grade. Was in like six or I must have been like 13. Um, but I didn't go to jail. I've been arrested a lot of times when I was like a kid, but since I was a kid, the first time I went to jail, juvenile hall, I must have been 16. I was 16 and I was living with my meth dealer, who a lot of my friends lived with. And my girlfriend's dad came over and to pick her up, and I ended up getting in a fight with him. He hit me with a pipe. He hit me with a pipe. The second time I caught it and I hit him back with it. And when the cops came, they took me. Uh, so that was the first time. And, uh, like similar to a lot of people, when we go to jail, we just come out proud, like we made it. But when I got sober, here's another thing that's funny to me. When I got sober, I didn't want any. I was, I was still like a gang member because that was my life. But I was trying so hard to get as far away from that as possible. I didn't understand how people were sober and still dressing like that they were tough guys and uh, prison mentality and getting new tattoos and all this stuff. I wanted that life to be so far away from me. I read books on like how to speak proper, how to like engage with people, and I was trying so hard to not be that uh, one of those prisons. I remember seeing like people. I'm like, man, this guy's been sober, 30 years, and he's still acting like a gang member, and he's still like, I never or a biker or something. I'm like, what the fuck, dude? You know?
When did that mindset switch for you from during heroin, you're living on Skid Row, to I don't want to look like a gang member and I'm going to start reading books about how to be more eloquent? When was that swap?
It happened, I would say, in three parts. The first part I was in treatment. I was in like this halfway house treatment center for a year, and I had gotten a fight with this guy. I hit this dude in the way, he really didn't do anything. I hit somebody, and the look he gave me affected me. And it made me feel like shit afterwards. And I had never felt that before. Normally, if you like knocking somebody out is like scoring a touchdown for other kids or a 3-pointer or something. In my world, knocking somebody out is like it's like scoring a goal, and it had never bothered me before. But the way this guy looked at me, it hurt me. And I told my sponsor, and he said, "You got to apologize to him, man." And I went and I apologized to him the next day, and I felt better. But I still had like that guilt. I felt like a piece of shit, and I felt like an idiot, you know. Uh, so that was the start of like toning down violence. And then when my daughter was born, I remember sitting there looking at her laying in the little like incubator thing. She was born like just like the heating lamp. I remember looking at her under the heating lamp sleeping and thinking like, fuck, this kid has no idea like what a loser her dad is. Like she lost, like, fuck, she really, like, she lost the lottery. Like, she could have been born to all these beautiful people, and she's born like she has no idea. I was just out of treatment. I didn't even have money to like uh I didn't have a job, I didn't have anything. I was just barely like doing jobs to make $50, $100. um and I just thought, what a fucking poor kid, man. But then that kind of like filled me with drive to do better. And then the next time, um, I got custody of her when she was 3. Her mother was still living in the projects doing drugs and all that. She resented me for getting a job. She thought I was a bitch for working and doing things normal or trying to. I lived with, my friends were staying with me. They were drinking, they were using. We were doing, I was still selling guns sober. But Sunday nights, Sunday mornings, Friday, Thursday nights, I'd be like, hey man, I gotta go handle some shit. I'll be back. I'm gonna go see a girl or I'm gonna go whatever. And I will go to my meeting. or would meet my sponsor in the morning. I would go to my commitment. I didn't tell anybody. And what I got one day, my daughter's mother went to jail, and I got custody of her. And my friends wanted me to do something that I basically kicked everybody. I'm like, this has to end. Like, my daughter lives with me now. Like, you guys all got to go. And I had to become like a full time single dad. So that was pretty much the end of that.
I want to know exactly where you were the moment you decided to stop using drugs.
It's funny because I know the moment, and it's not very significant. I was at the park. I was at a park. So my morning routine would be I take my methadone, uh, 5 a.m. I'd wash it down. Uh, I'd wash down like 5 or 6 Klonopin 2s. And then I would go, this is in Hollywood. Then I would go downtown, smoke crack all day, then shoot heroin to come off the crack. And then I'd go back to Hollywood, sell my meth. Uh, I slept in a porn arcade. So, because I can give the guy $6 and get like a long video and just sleep there for $6 in the booth.
Wait, what is a porn arcade? We don't have that here.
So in Hollywood, they have like these stalls. So it started because I caught I caught a selling case. When in law in the States, when you have individual baggies, it's a sales case. I fought it and won. And to never catch a sales case again, I would keep everything in one bag. So I would take people into the porn arcade and break it up for them. And then I realized I can sleep there because it's just a booth with a TV screen, and you pick a video out, like some porn video, and you pay $4 to $6, and you have that booth for some of them were like 6 hours long. It got to a point where I was constantly sick. If I did too much heroin, or I tried to up my methadone dose or take more Klonopins, I would just pass out. If I didn't do enough, I was sick. I was either sick or passed out. I was in this weird, it just wasn't working anymore. And I never felt euphoria. There was no euphoria. I was either sick or I'm sleeping. And one day I was at the park with my girlfriend at the time, and I was just like, man, I think I'm going to turn myself in. Like, I want to stop. And she was like, what? I go, yeah. I go, I'm going to call my mom. And I didn't talk to my mom. And I called my mom, and I told her, like, hey, I want to, I don't know what to do. And she was like, why the fuck are you calling me? Call me when you have some respect for yourself. And she basically hung up on me. And I remember thinking, like, yeah, like I gotta do something. And I called my public defender. I was all up, had warrants out for me. I was on the run. And I said, hey, I left a rehab like a year prior. I said, hey, like, I have a problem. I've been doing heroin. And she goes, we know. She goes, hey, Mr. Galvan. She goes, we know. I go, look, I'm all for going to the rehab, but like, I'm going to leave there. If you put me back in the detox rehab, I'm going to leave. Can I go to jail first? And she said, yeah, you have some warrants, come on in. And I'm like, can I not get violated? Like, I didn't want to go to do 7 years. And she goes, yeah, just come in and we'll figure it out. And I'm like, okay. She goes, can you be in tomorrow morning? I'm like, fuck. Because I'm like, tomorrow morning. I'm like, can it be Monday or, next week? And she goes, no, tomorrow morning. So I went in the next day, and started my sobriety journey.
So you literally handed yourself in to go to jail so you physically couldn't leave whilst you were detoxing.
Yeah, because I had tried to get myself sober a lot of times. My family sent me to Mexico. I left the day after I got there. I had tried. I was the youngest person at the BART clinic in Hollywood ever. They said, I had maxed out all my methadone detoxes. Um, I tried kicking, like just using benzos. I tried everything and I couldn't stop. And I went to detoxes as well. And I would leave. I would get that, when that phenomenon of craving kicks in, or that's, I would just fucking go. Nothing can stop me from leaving. Uh, the only place I had ever been able to kick successfully is jail. So, I knew that's what I had to do, and it sounded good at the time when I was talking to the public defender. But when I got there and started kicking, that was like the worst experience of my life. But it was significant, and it was good.
So how long were you there for?
6 weeks in jail. I was basically there through two court dates, uh, and until the rehab picked me up. So she let me do everything in there until the rehab picked me up. And that whole time, I didn't sleep more than 2 or 3 minutes at a time, cat naps. Kicking. There was a riot in jail. There was, horrible pain the whole time. My first night's sleep was when I got to the rehab, and I slept for like 24 hours straight through the groups the next day.
Richard, you spoke about the suicidal ideations you had for your entire life and that drugs and alcohol really numbed those sensations. What happens when you go sober? Do those thoughts come back?
I think my default is those thoughts. Uh, but now having a way to deal with them, it's it's they're tiny, if not non-existent. And the less I do, the bigger they can get. But now I know, like, when they start to creep, I know exactly what to do to get rid of them. And I don't. It's not. I'm comfortable knowing, like, hey, if I don't do these things, I'm probably going to get depressed, or I'm going to feel, maybe not suicidal depressed, but I'm going to feel low, and that's going to grow. I'm going to feel low, and then if I get lower, that's going to grow into, I want to die. So I try not to let myself get that low.
If you feel comfortable, I'd love to talk about you getting someone pregnant in rehab.
So I had a girlfriend, uh, when I was in, the mother of my firstborn, when I was in rehab. And I had gotten, I think Universal Studios passes were like $40 back then for a season pass. So I got some money and I got us both season passes, and we would go to Universal Studios and, go in the bathrooms, in the changing rooms and all that, and, do our thing. And she got pregnant off one of my passes. And I remember the day that she told me, uh, it was on the front porch, on the stoop of the rehab. She goes, look, and she gave me this piece of paper, and I opened it up, and it had like a picture of two storks holding the baby. And it said, congratulations, you're expecting. And I was like, whoa, you know, I was like, really? I was like, oh my God, and I still have the pregnancy test and that paper in my stuff. It didn't hit me what a bad situation I would be putting that baby in until the baby was in my hand.
Richard, does it cross your mind how different your children's lives are compared to when you were a child? And when they reach certain milestones, does it make you reflect on the milestones you should have been hitting throughout your childhood?
So I have 5 kids, and all of them, are from 3 years old to 19. And I've tried to fill their lives. Like my 19-year-old, her passport's full. She's been all over the world. She's lived in different countries with me. My 17-year-old lives with me right now. We live on a sailboat. We sail a little yacht. We sail all the time. Um, she's also lived and been around the world. I had never even been on a plane until I was 30. Sometimes I tell myself, like my 13-year-old, I'm like, fuck, I was already doing meth at that time. Sometimes I think like, wow, I was like a 20-year-old, 13-year-old. I was fighting all the time. I was doing drugs. I was stealing. I was doing like all these things. And I can't even picture a little bit. They don't even have the mindset, the complicated mindset to even like think of doing the things I was doing at that age, trying to tie people up and like trying, they're just so, which I'm glad because I've tried to fill their life with experiences and, I made sure that they don't have a rich kid mentality, but just with experiences and making them do things on their own. Book these flights, I don't know, take us here, find us a rickshaw, find us whatever, cook this food, and then put the sail up, just trying to, because I was doing a lot of things on my own. I would stay nights out on my own at 13. I can do complicated things. And I want to make sure that they also aren't sheltered and could do complicated things and have the same, like, forced to have the same growth that I had, but not in a bad way.
I'm going to start wrapping up the interview, but what I wanted to ask you, Richard, was you said before that when you can feel that moment when you had your second drink, because I think this could help a lot of listeners, when you were in that rehab, you could feel that darkness start to rear its head and you quickly swapped your thinking. What tools do you have for them if they want to try and avoid substances?
So the reason I wrote my story and I wrote what I believe helped me the most, which are some of the things that like I found out, like what I asked myself and what I realized myself what was the problem, kind of like a surrender process or like an actual, like a first step, not in a sense, but like a realization sense, like who am I hurting? What am I, how is this affecting me? Like, what does my family think about me? A process, and then an inventory, an amends process, and a way to be of service. The reason I wrote that book is so that somebody, even non-addicts, if especially addicts, if they read it and they can relate, like, hey, oh, this dude had some of the feelings like I had and had some of the, like I believe him. They can go through that process and I believe it'll have the same effect. And I know it has the same kind of spiritual awakening effect as a 12-step program. For me, there was no possible way I was going to do 12 steps or go to meetings or do anything like that because it was so lame and so weird. Nothing but a rock bottom would have led me back to a meeting where I would do what they were telling me to do and have found what I found. You know what I mean? Like it's such a low place, at least in the situation I was in, to have found that process. I had to go to a meeting. That's like the worst. If you think about it in society, there's nothing prestige. It's coming around. Like people are starting to think sober is cool. But when I got sober, it was the bottom rung Loserville, an AA meeting. If you were in an AA meeting, there was absolutely nothing. No stars were out. No celebrities were talking about being sober. You were the loser of the loser, scum of the earth. And people that are, my age or slightly younger or whatever may still have that in their head. If somebody is willing to do the work, addict or not addict, they can do it. But it just takes somebody with balls and guts. You got to get in a position of balls and guts to want to change your life. You don't need a bottom. You just need to.
I'm going to start wrapping up this interview, but where can my listeners find you? We're going to obviously add the book in the show notes, but talk me through a little bit about it.
The book is called The Addict, and it's my story. It's my philosophy for sobriety and living life, not just for an addict, but just living life to its fullest. And I've kind of distilled the steps for people that don't want to go to meetings, don't want to sponsor, or won't. I believe you can also do it without all the fluff of AA. So there's a program in there, and it's not just for addicts. It's like it's a spiritual awakening program. Instagram at Casablanca XSL. TikTok, The Addict.
I will put everything in the show notes. I'll put a link directly to the book. Thank you so much for joining me. I have never heard a story like yours. And I just want to thank you for your patience, because listeners, we were trying with technical difficulties for about 40 minutes. Richard is on a boat in the middle of Spain. It's 10:30 p.m. here at Sydney. So thank you so much for your patience.
No, thank you for having me. And also, the book, I made it like, I don't care about anybody's, if anybody wants it, just message me. I'll send them the audiobook free. I'll send them ebook free, whatever, man. I'm only here to help. This is my new life. I sold my company. I've sold all my properties. My whole life is my children and helping addicts. That's it. So I'm 100% here. Messages, people ask me, people want to help, sponsor. That's all I'm doing for now. So.
I love that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to Soberly Speaking. We are now dropping episodes every Mondays and Thursdays. You can catch the Monday interviews, the full episodes on YouTube at Soberly Speaking. We are also on TikTok, on Instagram. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple, hit that follow button to stay up to date with all the latest episodes. Oh, my love.